As Reverend Burens points out, there's a lot we don't know. We are often ignorant, perplexed, or wrong. Sometimes we realize how little we know, but mostly we do our best to confine and control the vast reality in which we are immersed, to make it understandable, manageable. Science has been our best tool for doing so. Words and math are science's tools for explaining the seemingly infinite number of things buzzing in and out of existence. These tools are, of course, symbolic systems which can only represent some portion of reality and never capture its fullness and richness. It's no surprise that science sometimes gets it wrong, as we have seen, for example, with the discovery of quantum physics, which introduced us to a whole different reality at the quantum level, one in which an atom may be either a wave or a particle, energy or matter. Scientists, of course, know that there's a lot more unknown than known, and that science will repeatedly correct itself about one or another theory. Uncertainty is fundamental to science. Scientists go with what works, but only until some discovery falsifies their understanding. While science has greatly increased our knowledge, its discoveries and inventions have also unintended, dangerous consequences. For example, the nuclear bomb, weed killers, and plastic. But perhaps the greatest danger has come from our acceptance and misunderstanding of the scientific method as the only way of knowing. The power of the scientific method to explain reality has led people to see it as the way to achieve certainty and truth, thereby often eclipsing other ways of knowing, especially the ways of spirituality. Max Weber, a famous sociologist, said that science had disenchanted the world, explaining that with its emphasis on reason, it had leached the world of mystery and transcendence. Science uses our left brains. It strives, like Lulu Miller's father, to be objective, impersonal, and analytical, focusing entirely on attempting to prove hypotheses arising from observations of the physical world through carefully controlled experimentation. It separates out the object of study, sometimes ignoring the environment and relationships, so scientists have sometimes failed to notice connection, interdependence, and wholeness, fundamental characteristics of reality. They have also, of course, sometimes failed to be objective, and they have sometimes ignored less obvious differences or similarities in the haste to categorize. Lulu Miller's Why Fish Don't Exist, which really inspired this sermon, provides an evocative exploration of why we should not trust our categories or science to the degree that we do. The title reflects the scientific discovery that fish is not a taxonomic group. That is, creatures that have scales and live in water are not all descendants of a common ancestor. Miller's memoir is about her efforts to come to terms with her scientist fathers telling her as a young girl that only chaos exists, in which none of us has value and there is no meaning. Depression and thoughts of suicide, the thought of a gun, plague her throughout much of her life. Efforts to find a way out result in her studying the life of David Starr Jordan, the first president of Stanford University and a famous ichthyologist. Primarily known as a taxonomist, he discovered and named an enormous number of fish. Miller a science journalist found Jordan of interest because he had such great enthusiasm for categorizing nature, seeing in the categories evidence of God's intention to reveal a great ladder ascending from the lowly creatures up to man. While Jordan's delight in categories as a source of meaning fascinates Miller, she eventually uncovers his passion for eugenics, another kind of categorizing that results in trying to eliminate the unfit, for example, poor people with disabilities. Well before the Nazis, Jordan encouraged sterilization of women identified as unfit as a way of keeping them from having children who would perpetuate their mother's deficiencies. Miller visited Virginia State Colony where sterilizations were performed, and also visited 2 of the women who, without their consent, were sterilized. She found these women to be happy, loving people, not unfit. And she lost her respect for Jordan and categorization as a way of describing nature. She saw its power, but she also saw its danger. That we might use our observations to restrict, inhibit, and reduce the richness and wildness of nature became even more clear when she read that fish as a category had been eliminated because scientists had relied on external appearances when what were known as fish came from many different ancestors. She feels free, but she doesn't know into what. At this point, she finishes her work on Jordan and moves, giving up any hope that her relationship with the curly-haired man will work out. He had left her one night because she kissed a girl, but she, depressed, hung on to the possibility that he would take her back. Her whole life turns around when she finds herself fascinated by and then in love with the emerald-eyed girl. Something she had never imagined is now possible because she had learned to reject or at least be suspicious of human categories. In her words, I broke through the category, saw the world for what it is, a place of infinite possibility. All categories imaginary. It was the best feeling in the world. The gun still comes. I consider the offerings. And then I consider the fish. I picture a silvery fish dissolving in my hand. If fish don't exist, what else don't we know about the world? What other truths are waiting behind the lines we draw over nature? What other categories are about to cave in? On Neptune, it rains diamonds. It really does. Scientists figured that out just a few years ago. The longer we examine our world, the stranger it proves to be. Perhaps there will be a mother waiting inside a person deemed unfit. Perhaps there will be medicine inside a weed like a dandelion. Salvation inside the kind of person you had discounted. When I give up fish, I get a mantra, a trick, a prescription for hope. There are good things in store, not because I deserve them or work for them, but because they are as much a part of chaos as destruction and loss. Life, the flip side of death, growth, of rot, the best way of ensuring that you don't miss them is to admit with every breath that you have no idea what you're looking at. To examine each object in the avalanche of chaos with curiosity, with doubt. Important here is her acceptance of chaos as a source of hope, joy, love, curiosity, and vitality, rather than being always frightened and distressed at profusion, uncertainty, and mystery. She can be intrigued and fascinated by chaos and hesitant to accept any conclusion as final. I, of course, read this memoir from a lesbian perspective. It's difficult to see ourselves as lesbians if we are not familiar with other lesbians or if everyone around us is condemning lesbians. I was a lesbian long before I had even heard the word. And as soon as I knew what a lesbian was, I concluded that others would not approve, largely because no one talked about it. Even more important, do we need to categorize people as lesbians when they differ very little from heterosexual women? Where is the line between lesbian, bisexual, trans, and heterosexual women? For that matter, between men and women. We know today how fluid gender is. Why can't we work toward a world that supports people's loving who they love, dressing as they wish, and behaving in ways undefined by gender? We see the harm done when people must be categorized. People are so much more than any category we place them in. I, of course, also read this memoir from a Buddhist perspective. The Buddha certainly implied that reality is something like chaos. When he identified the three marks of existence, he said impermanence, unreliability, and interdependence. Reality confuses and pains us because change happens so fast, because it thwarts our desire for permanence, safety, and stability, and because it arises from a multitude of causes and conditions so vast and interconnected that it exceeds our capacity to understand. It certainly sounds like chaos. But the Buddha also offered a way not to be overwhelmed, confused, or devastated by reality. Foundational to doing so is acceptance and love of reality as it is, constantly changing, sometimes painful, and beyond our capacity to understand or control. To be sure, we will and should try to understand and control when possible and appropriate. But whenever we rigidly hang on to what we know, despite all evidence to the contrary sometimes, and as if we were capable of fully knowing, suffering arises for us and for others. It's much better if we hold our views loosely, always open to revision, or as Miller puts it, with curiosity and with doubt. Additionally, Miller provides this insight. When I gave up fish, I get a skeleton key, a fish-shaped skeleton key that pops the grid of rules off this world and lets you step through to a wilder place, this other world within this one, the gridless place out the window where fish don't exist and diamonds rain from the sky and each and every dandelion is reverberating with possibility. As a Buddhist, I recognize this other world within this one, this gridless place of possibility, as the experience that we have and when the thinking mind shuts down and we are entirely present in the moment. Meditation, mindfulness, being enthralled by the beauty of the earth, feeling the barriers between you and another person dissolve, repetitive activity, psychedelic drugs, music and art, near-death experiences, and even having a stroke, as Jill Bolt Taylor's My Stroke of Insight reveals. All of these, and many more, can allow us to enter this other world. Here we experience emptiness and everything, possibility and peace, complete acceptance of whatever comes, and bliss and love. This is what I am calling spiritual knowing, and what Alan Watts and many others have hypothesized is the foundational experience that led to religions. It's an experience of the enchanted world of oneness, love, joy, amazement, and reverence. As Miller discovers, spiritual experience is what makes life worthwhile. In her words, it gives her the best feeling in the world. It's a kind of knowing not provided by the scientific method. It's intuitive, experienced, and ineffable. It's felt. To feel connected is to lose the sense of self and to feel immersed in something greater, something for which there are simply no words. Some people call it God, some nirvana, some the Tao, and some simply mystery. In any case, what's important is not the name, which can get in the way anyway, but the first-hand experience that there is no other, only oneness, an experience that motivates love, compassion, joy, peace, and a search for justice. In How to Change Your Mind, What the New Science of Psychedelics Teaches Us, another science journalist, Michael Pollan, reports that certain parts of the brain light up when people on psychedelics have a mystical experience, and certain other areas go quiet. Lisa Miller's The Awakened Brain, The New Science of Spirituality, says about the same thing, and so does Jill Bolt Taylor in My Stroke of Insight. These books also explore the many positive effects of spiritual experience, as does Bruce Grayson's After a Doctor explores what near-death experiences reveal about life and beyond. All of these books provide a scientific understanding of spiritual knowing. It may seem contradictory to use science to defend another kind of knowing, but is it really? Awe, wonder, and reverence often motivate scientists, and many of the great scientific discoveries began as intuitions. Einstein repeatedly credited imagination as crucial to his thought experiments. I'm not a science denier. I hope you know that. We need science, and I respect the ways in which it's advanced our knowledge. In general, I trust its findings and see it as vital to the survival of our species. But I find spiritual knowing a trustworthy and necessary counterbalance to scientific knowing, one especially needed right now. If we are to thrive, if we are to be keepers of the earth, we need to feel our connections, our belonging to something larger than ourselves, a oneness that evokes love and all its attendant emotions for the earth and for all its inhabitants. We need enchantment. May we nurture those practices that support such knowing.